Hello and welcome to Chapter 3 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So, Chapter 3 is called The Letters from No One. So I'll let you see the picture here. That starts the chapter. Alright, so The Letters from No One. The escape of the Brazilian boa constrictor earned Harry his longest ever punishment. By the time he was allowed out of his cupboard again, the summer holidays had started and Dudley had already broken his new video camera, crashed his remote control airplane, and first time out on his racing bike, knocked down old Mrs. Figg as she crossed Privet Drive on her crutches. Harry was glad school was over, but there was no escaping Dudley's gang, who visited the house every single day. Pierce, Dennis, Malcolm, and Gordon were all big and stupid. But as Dudley was the biggest and stupidest of the lot, he was the leader. The rest of them were all quite happy to enjoy Dudley's favorite sport, Harry hunting. This is why Harry spent much of the time as possible out of the house, wandering around and thinking about the end of the holidays, where he could see a tiny ray of hope. When September came, he would be going off to secondary school, and for the first time in his life, he wouldn't be with Dudley. Dudley had been accepted into Uncle Vernon's old private school, Smeltings. Piers Polkins was going there too. Harry, on the other hand, was going to Stonewall High, the local public school. Dudley thought this was very funny. So in Europe and a lot of places in the United States, if you are wealthy and privileged, you get to go to this private school. And so Dudley thought it was hilarious that Harry is not going to the private school, that he's going to the public school. The stuff people's heads down the toilets the first day at Stonewall, he told Harry. Want to come upstairs and practice? No thanks, said Harry. The poor toilets never had anything as horrible as your head down it. It might be sick. Then he ran before Dudley could work out what he'd said. One day in July, Aunt Petunia took Dudley to London to buy his Smeltings uniform, leaving Harry at Mrs. Figg's. Mrs. Figg's wasn't as bad as usual. It turned out she'd broken her leg tripping over one of her cats, and she didn't seem quite as fond of them as before. She let Harry watch television and gave him a bit of chocolate cake that tasted as though she'd had it for several years. That evening, Dudley paraded around the living room for the family in his brand new uniform. Smelting boys wore maroon tailcoats, orange knickerbockers, and flat straw hats called boaters. They also carried knobbly sticks used for hitting each other while the teachers weren't looking. This was supposed to be good training for later in life. As he looked at Dudley in his knickerbockers, which is what they call pants, Uncle Vernon said gruffly that it was the proudest moment of his life. Aunt Petunia burst into tears and said she couldn't believe it was her icky Dudleykins. He looked so handsome and grown up. Harry didn't trust himself to speak. He thought 2 of his ribs might already have cracked from trying not to laugh. So Harry thinks his little outfit's funny. But his mom and dad are so proud of Dudley. There was a horrible smell in the kitchen the next morning when Harry went in for breakfast. It seemed to be coming from a large metal tub in the sink. He went to have a look. The tub was full of what looked like dirty rags, swimming in gray water. "What's this?" he asked Aunt Petunia. Her lips tightened as they always did if he dared to ask a question. "Your new uniform," she said. Harry looked in the bowl again. "Oh," he said, "I didn't realize it had to be so wet." "Don't be stupid," snapped Aunt Petunia. "I'm dyeing some of Dudley's old things gray for you. It'll look just like everyone else's when I'm finished." Harry seriously doubted this, but thought best not to argue. He sat down at the table and tried not to think about how he was going to look on the first day at Stonewall High, like he was wearing bits of old elephant skin, probably. Dudley and Uncle Vernon came in both with wrinkled nose because of the smell from Harry's new uniform. Uncle Vernon opened his newspaper as usual, and Dudley banged his smelting stick, which he carried everywhere, on the table. They heard the click of the mail slot and flop of the letters on the doormat. "Get the mail, Dudley," said Uncle Vernon from behind his paper. "Make Harry get it." "Get the mail, Harry." "Make Dudley get it." "Poke him with your smelting stick, Dudley." They are not very nice to him. Harry dodged the smelting stick and went in to get the mail. 3 things lay on the doormat: a postcard from Uncle Vernon's sister Marge, who was vacationing on the Isles of Wight, a brown envelope that looked like a bill, and a letter for Harry. Harry picked it up and stared at it, his heart twinging like a giant elastic band. No one, ever, in his whole life had written to him. Who would? He had no friends, no other relatives. He didn't belong to the library. So he'd never gotten rude notes asking for books back. Yet here it was, a letter, addressed so plainly there could be no mistake. So it says, Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, 4 Privet Drive, Little Willing, Surrey. The envelope was thick and heavy, made of yellowish parchment, and the address was written in emerald green ink. There was no stamp. Turning the envelope over, his hand trembling, Harry saw a purple wax seal bearing a coat of arms, a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding the letter H. "Hurry up, boy," shouted Uncle Vernon from the kitchen. "What are you doing, checking for letter bombs?" He chuckled at his own joke. Harry went back to the kitchen, still staring at his letter. He handed Uncle Vernon the bill and the postcard, sat down, and slowly began to open the yellow envelope. Uncle Vernon ripped open the bill, snorted in disgust, and flipped over the postcard. "Marge is ill," he informed Aunt Petunia. "Ate a funny whelk." "Dad," said Dudley. "Dad, Harry's got something." Harry was on the point of unfolding his letter, which was written on the same heavy parchment as the envelope, when it was jerkily snapped out of his hand by Uncle Vernon. "That's mine," said Harry, trying to snatch it back. "Who'd be writing to you?" sneered Uncle Vernon, shaking the letter open from one hand and glancing at it. His face went from red to green, faster than a set of traffic lights, and it didn't stop there. Within seconds, it was grayish white of old porridge. "Petunia!" he gasped. Dudley tried to grab the letter to read it, but Uncle Vernon held it out high out of his reach. Uncle Petunia took it curiously and read the first line. For a moment, it looked as though she might faint. She clutched her throat and made a choking noise. "Vernon. Oh my goodness, Vernon." They stared at each other, seeming to have forgotten that Harry and Dudley were still in the room. Dudley wasn't used to being ignored. He gave his father a sharp tap on the head with his smelting stick. "I want to read that letter," he said loudly. "I want to read it," said Harry furiously, "as it's mine." "Get out, both of you," choked Uncle Vernon, stuffing the letters back inside its envelope. Harry didn't move. "I want my letter," he shouted. "Let me see it," demanded Dudley. "Out!" roared Uncle Vernon. "Out!" He took both Harry and Dudley by the scuffs of their necks and threw them into the hall, slamming the kitchen door behind them. Harry and Dudley promptly had a furious but silent fight over who would listen through the keyhole. Dudley won, so Harry, his glasses dangling from one ear, lay flat on his stomach to listen at the crack between the door and the floor. "Vernon," Aunt Petunia was saying in a quivering voice, "look at the address. How could they possibly know where he sleeps? You don't think they're watching the house?" "Watching, spying, might be following us," uttered Uncle Vernon wildly. "But what should we do, Vernon? Should we write back, tell them we don't want?" Harry could see Uncle Vernon's shiny black shoes pacing up and down the kitchen. "No," he said finally. "No, we'll ignore it. If they don't get any answer, yes, that's the best. We won't do anything." "But I'm not having one in the house, Petunia. Didn't we swear when we took him in, we'd stamp out that dangerous nonsense?" And that is where we're going to stop. Cliffhanger. All right, so they're getting letters. Harry's getting a letter from someone, and they know he lives under the stairs. So someone is either watching them or following them or just knows about Harry's situation. And Mr. Dursley says that they made a promise to each other that when they took him in, they would not let this nonsense go on. So you're going to have to find out what that is tomorrow. See you then.